Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for those of you guys joining us on another Revizto Global Webinar. We're excited to get this kicked off today and excited for you guys all to join us. If you guys haven't filled out the survey, we are kind of taking a quick poll here just to see a group of who everybody is on our webinar. It looks like currently right now we have about 35% architecture, 20% general contractors, 23% engineering, 5% multidiscipline, 5% owner, 5% consultant, and about 10% other. So we're kind of floating through there. So if you want to jump in there and add your feedback, we certainly appreciate that. And we'll get this kicked off. So again, thank you guys all for joining us on a live webinar today on Valentine's Day to discuss something that we all love, which is technology. The focus of today's webinar is to talk about, our love for technology, but also some of the challenges that we face. So one of the biggest, complaints that we hear here at Revizto is, we all love technology. However, one of the things that we all do not like is when we purchase new technology and it doesn't speak to one another. So we make a huge investment into one platform. We have something that fits our needs and maybe solves a completely different problem. However, those two technologies do not communicate. So one of the big focuses in 2019 for Revizto is common data environment, where we can leverage the investment that you guys have already made and make sure that we are, speaking with these other technologies. We're making the most efficient workflow for you guys based on the environment that you guys have already set up. And here today we have somebody who is arguably one of the biggest advocates of a common data environment, and Nathan Wood as the guest here today. So welcome, Nathan, and if you would like to tell us a little bit about this crazy idea that you had and kind of where you started with the Construction Progress Coalition.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks, Mark. And it's great to be here and talk to everyone internationally. Although it's ironic that we're probably both here in Denver, right? But yet not next to each other. Internet just makes everything easier, right?
Absolutely.
But a quick background on just the history of the CP Coalition. Back when I was working for a large general contractor here in the U.S., we got together prior to, it was actually a Bluebeam conference in 2013, and really understood our first shared pain, which was PDF drawings and just having better quality of the exports from a Revit or a CAD that uses true type font, that has naming conventions, all these things that make integrations and interoperability between these systems that we expect today so much easier. We have to start with really that ground one, and we produced a guidelines in 2014, the construction PDF guidelines that is still referenced in many documents, including now in 2017 was referenced in the National BIM Guide for Owners. So really since that point have been really spreading the word around open standards of whether it's an open PDF, because again, for those who are not aware, the PDF transition from being proprietary to Adobe over to an ISO International Standards Organization standard in 2008, which was part of this whole rise, but realizing that open is much more than just PDF. We have IFC, we have now open APIs and all different ways of integrating data. And so as we sort of transitioned and combined together with the original Construction Open Standards Alliance, COSA, that were shepherding the AGC XML interoperability standards, we've now combined forces to become the Construction Progress Coalition. And I'll be talking to you today about the Common Data Exchange, CDX.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so guys, today what we're going to be focusing on is kind of the problem which Nathan discovered, back several years ago when he was at DPR and kind of has been working towards making this common data environment accessible to everybody. And one of the big reasons we partnered with Nathan in trying to, eliminate some of these shared pains is to streamline workflow. And so today we're going to walk through some of the common examples, as well as, using the examples that we map out on paper and showing you kind of how those integrate with some of the platforms like Leica or Matterport or Procore or Revit, some of these other platforms in a live demo. So Excellent. Take it away, Nathan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just, continuing on from that, that really aligns, these examples that we're going to show today align perfectly with CPC's mission, which is to align architecture, engineering, construction, which seems like that's the majority of folks on the call, with all different technology solution providers, Revizto and others, as well as realizing that the governing organizations are authorities having jurisdiction, and the owners play a huge role in this as well, to promote the adoption of this common data exchange, or CDX, which is really a language for us to support, better integration standards between platforms at the company level, but also even more importantly at the project level. Because really our vision is, we need to change the way that we measure project performance. We need a new baseline that doesn't just look at profit and loss, but looks at some of these leading indicators. And the only way we're really going to get there is through a collaborative effort that focuses on shared value and transparency. So, but let's dive into the meat of it here, because we definitely got some technical folks here. So the problem that we're really focusing on, and especially what we're going to be focusing on in this webinar, is really this $15.8 billion in waste that's created due to just lack of interoperability. There's a great graphic here of, regardless of which perspective you are across the project delivery supply chain, we're creating a ton of waste in how we pass or don't pass information between one another. Again, the top driver of that non-interoperability being manual re-entering of data from application to application. So I think that's why we're all here, is to solve that problem, to be able to say, hey, if I want to do all of my pay apps and worksheets and RFIs and different stuff within Revizto, I should be able to do that, even though I know my accountant probably isn't going to want to work through Revizto, but it should be able to talk to that. And I think that's the vision of this common data exchange, and really addressing these shared pains, and trying to articulate to folks that don't fully understand the kind of data side of it. There's so many physical examples of these shared pains where just plug systems from the UK that don't work in the US, and even if you buy the converter, you don't realize that I learned this actually at our last Lean conference, that the whole UK system is based on direct current, not alternating current. So the second you put in one of those converters to a UK TV, you'll completely blow the amp. So just little things of we don't know what we don't know, and a lot of why our frustrations are with application is the same, that we don't know what we don't know. So let's dive into that. So, in trying to articulate, what is a CDX, and Mark and I were talking about this earlier, one of the better analogies that we've come to is looking at UL, Underwriters Laboratories, and their ability. I can remember as a project engineer doing punch list walks and having to check that the proper UL rating was shown and clearly identified for each fire rated door, and that UL is not just for fire rating of doors. It goes across electrical certifications, across plumbing certifications. They've really become a great what we call a matchmaker, that's trying to make the engineer's life easier, that's trying to make the installer's life easier, that's trying to make the manufacturer's life easier. So if we think of that concept of UL but for data and for the quality of data across the supply chain, that's what we want to look at as CDX. So how do we implement a CDX? It's as easy as 1, 2, 3, although as we all know, this stuff isn't really that easy once we get into the weeds of it. But the reality is that there are enough standards that exist out there already. CDX is not intended to be another standard. In fact, it's meant to be sort of a labeling, a way of organizing all these existing standards and categorizing where the common touch points are and sort of where that lowest common denominator is. So step one is, again, to harmonize those industry standards and look at, what is the titles and the project numbers and the things that need to be consistent, and what should those naming conventions be, so that we can get to the next step of actually validating that exchange of email addresses of basic information that we're constantly having to retype in or copy and paste, and we lose information and different challenges. So being able to directly transfer that administrative data is step 2, and knowing that a lot of that isn't going to be everybody relying on one standard, but actually a translation between standards. So that's really what makes it step 2. And then the last one being, okay, now that we're free flowing this information between, how can we start to capture some of this descriptive data? That's really where the value is, where those leading indicators, they're going to help us prevent issues in the future, but not until that data has really been verified and put into a common cloud, so we can use things like machine learning and artificial intelligence to apply on top of that, but only when we have that step 3 of verified data. I know there's a lot, Mark. I don't know if any questions have come through, if you have any thoughts before we dive into the next part.
No, I think that's great. And again, guys, feel free to put your questions into the question area, and we're going to make sure that we address, the last 10 to 15 minutes for questions you guys might have about this. So as questions come up, feel free to just type those in, and we'll certainly address those live after the demonstration.
Awesome. And so as we mentioned before, at the end of the day, it's really about having a common language. That what we're missing is architects aren't talking to general contractors, talking to owners, talking to material suppliers to really figure out, what is the easiest way to ensure that this data is reliably and efficiently passed from one stakeholder to another. And so part of this common language, if for those who don't get super into the weeds of the technical language, we want to have very simple terms like, what is the difference between a package and a database? That, someone's database is either their system of record or it's a common data environment. But a package, it could be a PDF, it could be an IFC, it could be just a packet of data that's passed through an API. But understanding that the difference between that in a database, and then how they're passed through either CDX listed tools, and it could be a point solution or it could be a platform that's listed to exchange that type of package data. And then are you validated to accept that data, accept RFI data or accept submittal data, and know what to check or spit it out if it doesn't have necessarily the correct information in it. And then once we have this level of sort of security, we can get into much more kind of collaborative environments where we're not just verifying the data as we talked about before, but we can actually have platforms now. Whereas, as Mark said, there's actually a true common data environment that all these different players are working around, and we have those rule sets that we know are going to be different on every project, but that we make it really easy to set those up through a CDX, and we can choose, from project to project, what will our common data environment platform be that we use. And I know Mark hopes it's Revizto, but it may be other products, and just having the ability to choose that and choose the data and separate that from the tool is really what this is all about. And it also allows for sessions too, realizing that things that are periodic sessions, like an RFI that gets created or a submittal review, should be treated separately than, say, a common data environment platform. So just some terminology there before we dive into actually how this fits into the project delivery, because I'm sure most of the folks on this call are familiar with the McLeamy curve, this cost influence curve that says, in theory, if you spend more time in the earlier design phases with more people, that you will have a more reliable design, more influence over it, and ultimately lower cost and less changes. But how do we communicate this in the real world where we're not always doing design build or IPD projects and we're in more of this hard bid world? What we've come up with is we're calling it the CDX playbook. And as it sort of overlays with the McLeamy curve here, you can see these very critical inflection points of this phase one boundary of alignment of, are we really aligned on what is that we're going to design and coordinate and collaborate together before we cross over this boundary of realization where we actually start making the product, we fabricate it either offsite or onsite or purchase that material. And then finally, that boundary of certification of, are the as-builts correct? Is everything good to go? And the closeout before we hand over into operations. And so just providing a language for us to say, are you doing your RFI workflow in phase 2 or in phase 3? Because that's going to completely change, how we do RFIs or how we do submittals. And that's kind of the idea behind this, and that these tiers here are representative of kind of who gets access and what level we're at. So everybody should be getting access to tier 0, the common data environment, of course, and then should be able to report collaboration items or issues up to tier 1. But really, it's the liable designers that control that tier 2 of what are the formal design responses, and we very much allow that to be protected because, again, that's a legal contract thing. And then once those responses come back, if there's a cost and schedule impact or change, then that needs to be noted in tier 3. But ultimately, the whole goal is for everyone to be protecting that tier 4, the owner's ultimate vision. And so with that, let's just dive into some examples and hopefully make some sense out of this. So at the last AEC Next event that Revizto was a great partner with us in this, we actually tried to talk about and use this CDX language to articulate 4 different challenges. One challenge we'll talk about real quickly was just the design change to impact report. And as you can see from this subsequent CDX playbook, this isn't necessarily a very streamlined process. It's actually fairly a broken process. And this is actually our ideal state of when a designer releases a change that happens after the boundary of realization, and there needs to be a cost impact, what we call an RFQ, request for quotation, between a trade and a GC that then needs to be approved by an owner that then is then sent down to the common data environment to be confirmed again by the GC before distributing out to those different players. So you can see all the different parts and pieces that happen when late designs happen and the waste that gets created. And it provides a language to communicate to owners and others, this is why this is not working and this is how we should do it better. But now the challenge becomes, once we start to rearrange how this is done, we have to look at technology and say, can technology solve this problem with us? So as we move into one of the Revizto examples, hopefully most of you folks called into the last webinar. I certainly watched it with Revizto and Procore, and they brought up this example of issues in Revizto being able to send to Procore, and then within Procore identifying what is the very different contractual difference between a coordination issue and an RFI. And so we'll just show this real briefly in the CDX playbook, and then Mark will pull it up in Revizto and we can actually show that workflow. Because I think this would be kind of the bare bones minimum use of this integration of just, okay, I've have an issue here that I find and I want to send it into Procore's system as a coordination issue, let them decide if it's an RFI, and then it would go to that designer into the tier 2, where they would then have their response and send that back. And it sounds like it isn't a sort of an integrated, so that once that information comes back, you can then see that again within Revizto. And Mark, is that something that we want to go through and actually show what that looks like for those that have not seen that workflow?
Yeah, I think it would make sense. We can run through this workflow, and are we taking this to dashboard right now, Nathan, or is that our next example?
So the next one, would be this dashboard here. So yeah, I think let's show what this workflow looks like, and then and then we can go to the dashboard one after that. Okay,
perfect. So guys, I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk through this in a real live world example. Okay, so what you guys can see on my screen, I am here in Revit. And so as we talk about kind of that common data environment and one of the initiatives for Revizto and streamlining, these workflows, we obviously have the ability to capture this issue directly within the native platform, Tekla, Revit, Navisworks, Civil 3D, and utilizing this new issue button. But because this is a Revizto webinar, and we're most of our customers are actually identifying these issues within Revizto, we're going to actually just start here and go through that process that Nathan just outlined. So I'm going to jump into here. Actually, I'm going to shut off all my current issues so we don't get anybody confused. And we're going to come over here and just identify a problem area. And I'm just going to highlight a couple different things maybe that we want to take a look at. Section out this, maybe make this a little bit larger. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to jump into our stamp button. So for those of you guys familiar with our stamps, these are predefined by your project, and we have different categories based on common issues we've identified. So it's obviously going to, when we select a specific stamp, it's going to, for architectural, it's going to be sent to a specific designer that those issues need to be addressed by. But for this webinar, we created a common data exchange stamp, and I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to add that stamp in there. So we can see the CDX stamp there. We can see it's added to Dan McKinnon, and I'm actually just going to come in here and we're going to create a deadline as of, we'll make it tomorrow. So now that I've added that specific issue in there, I'm going to go into chat, can add some notes. I can now add a 360 photo if I'd like to that. But for the time being, we're just going to go back to the issue tracker. So we can see that this specific issue that we just created, this common data exchange assigned to Dan McKinnon, has not been pushed to Procore. So we can see right here, this one's an RFI, this one's a coordination issue. So we're just going to elevate this to Procore right now. So I'm going to click send to Procore, and it's going to take that screenshot and it's going to move that to Procore. However, I think it's really important in the value of this common data environment. This isn't just a PDF. This isn't a dumb screenshot that has no intelligent data. It has all that metadata that you guys work so hard to maintain during in the building information model process through Revit. It's retaining all that data, which allows you a plethora of number of different options to be able to get more detail about this as well. So as we can see here, it's already labeled. It has the deadline as of tomorrow that we add it, and all this stuff transfers in real time. So from here, you're going to notice now that this issue is now a coordination issue in real time. So we can tell that we elevated this to a coordination issue inside of Procore in this example. And I'm going to elevate this to an RFI. We're going to hit create new RFI, and we're going to call this CDX webinar. Type in some questions. We can come in here, add the location, select our RFI manager. We're going to use Brett Settles today, and I'm going to create my draft. So as I've created my draft, you can see we have successfully created that draft. And what you'll notice inside of Revizto, this is now an RFI. So if I wanted to filter by all of my, in this case, Procore coordination issues, we can see a list of all of those, as well as coming back and seeing a list of all of our RFIs that have been pushed to Procore. See all the notes and stuff that have been associated with it. But the beauty of this, because we are leveraging that XYZ coordinate, and we're really just taking, taking care of that XYZ coordinate and the metadata from that issue that we've created. If I come back in here and I want to select 2D, even an issue from Procore, we can see exactly where that falls on our plans, our sheets, our elevations. I'll jump over here to a mechanical sheet, and we're going to see exactly where that specific issue lives, because it's based off the XYZ coordinate. So obviously we're here in Revizto now. So you may ask, well, what about those people working inside of Procore? Well, the beauty of this common data environment in this example is if we want to identify this screenshot doesn't tell us much. It's just a quick snippet, but we maybe want to get some more data around where the specific issue exists, maybe what's around it. So all I have to do is come over here, select common data environment. It's going to launch Revizto. And what you'll notice is that if we want to unsection this, we can get an idea of where we're located within the model. If I select 3D, we can see those pipes that we highlighted. If I press M on my keyboard, it's going to show me my specific elevation that I'm at. I can scroll in here. It can even tell me, exactly what direction I'm looking. We can go to different, floor plans to see where that's going to fall within a different level or what room it's maybe above. So I'll jump into, let's find a level 2-1. And we can kind of get a quick snapshot of where that specific issue is based on the elevation we've selected. However, as Nathan alluded to, we're not fixing this issue within our coordination platform. We have to go back to, Tekla, FabMEP, Revit to be able to address this issue. So because we've identified that issue, it's been pushed to Procore, the ability to basically see those issues within Procore, and because we've used that Revizto issue plugin, we're able to go back to any platform we want because of that common data environment. So I'm going to go fix this, RFI that we've addressed, and all I'm going to do is select issue tracker. You're going to see it pop up, and let's go over to our RFIs. And I'm going to find that one that we were talking about where we just created now. So when I double click this, what you're going to notice is on my secondary monitor, it automatically creates that isometric view to allow us to adjust that within Revit. So that's kind of how we are streamlining that process. And again, I used Revit here, but we could have gone back to a number of different platforms that we integrate directly, in this case, from Procore.
Well, and that's a great example. Maybe if you want to pull up that dashboard, I can show what the new CDX that you just basically described of Revizto being the. Let me see. What do I need to share my screen now? Just take it back.
So I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
You should be able to share now, Nathan.
Yep. Okay, great. So yeah, so rather than looking at, Procore as kind of the central hub of where everything goes through, which is, is really, I would argue, a private data environment for that general contractor, this other approach where if we're much earlier in the phase where we're being more collaborative inside of BIM, that when that coordination issue comes up and is, developed in Revizto, but the contractor still needs to record that inside of their Procore system, or maybe there's an engineer that can provide comments to that because, again, it's a free, open, transparent, common data environment. But ultimately, if that does need to become a formal RFI where we need a formal design response, then it can still be elevated, even though it may be contractually inside Procore. Everybody's kind of stayed aware of it and updated within the Revizto common data environment. And again, that just may be one way that one project chose how to do this. The point is that, do you understand the data that needs to flow, how the contracts allow you to, and how these platforms can start to replace PDFs and Excel files and all these other things that people tend to resort to, because that's the way we've always done it, when really we can be much more efficient to capture the same data using these integrated platforms and using a common data environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which
and I think it's
and it gives us
huge.
dashboards, right? Which is hopefully what we'll look at, where we can start to see some trends, right, of comparing coordination issues to RFIs, because then that's where you'll get a leading indicator, is if we identify that RFIs are necessary, and they're not necessarily bad as long as they're not happening when we're out in construction, but we'd rather have much more coordination issues that get resolved and sort of reduce the number of RFIs. So like, how could we measure the difference between those? I mean, I know you were showing that, right, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And with those dashboards, you're able to benchmark kind of the progress and the percentage of, okay, what's our breakdown between RFIs and coordination issues? Mm-hmm. How many are occurring in this phase, and where are they located? Who are these specific issues assigned to? And we can do that all just leveraging that real-time data, where we're taking screenshots and doing Excel reports and sending things on Slack and Google Drive and pushing some to Revizto and some to Procore and some to a number of different other platforms. Very hard to be able to pull an accurate dashboard to see a snapshot of your project.
Exactly. So I know we've got one more example for as-built. Should we dive into that one, or did you have any other dashboard stuff we need to go through?
Well, let's jump into the as-built, and we'll show the dashboard after that.
Cool. Sounds good. So in this example, we had another CDX innovation challenge, which is really around transforming the as-built. I think we can all admit that the as-built handover phase, not only is it frustrating, but it's garbage in, garbage out, and we get a lot of really bad data. And so, how do we kind of better qualify at that boundary of certification all this information that's coming from the different design and implementation stakeholders, and passing that over to the construction phase? I know, Mark, you showed a cool example where you're actually able to bring in, is it laser scan data as well as drone data, or you were doing some comparisons there to help us improve that verification process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So RCPs, RCSs, OBJs, so 360 photos. We have a number of different existing ways we can capture existing conditions in the field.
And I think, the workflow there being, how are we overlaying these, identifying where there's discrepancies between, what is the physical as-built and what was the design as-built. So, because there are, a lot, especially certain facility owners, that it really does matter that everything is exactly in the right place in BIM. And so it's something that, has been a pipe dream of mine, since the early BIM days, but just the ability for tools to do that now is amazing. But, getting that as a requirement can often still times be an uphill battle to sell it to owners.
I agree.
But yeah, it hopefully gets easier. Is that something that you wanted to show that demo, or?
Yeah, let's, okay. So let me share my screen and we'll walk through kind of this same example with existing conditions.
Perfect. Yeah, because really you could treat it as a coordination issue, that needs to be resolved, and which really just means you need to update the BIM to meet the as-built, and it would only be in that condition where that change that you identified actually created an issue and needed a design change that it would be elevated to an RFI.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same workflow in a different phase.
Yeah, so taking this full circle. From capturing these existing conditions in the field. And first off, before we get started here, I want to thank Victaulic. I don't know if anybody from Victaulic is on the line, but this incredible model was provided by them. So we thank them for their support and allowing us to use this project as an example. But just getting started here, as you can see, we have our, captured data in the field with our point cloud or OBJ. In this case, it's a point cloud. And being able to, take that model, and because we're on the same coordinate system, we're kind of speaking the same language, we're able to identify those specific issues. Additionally, because we have those plan sheets coming from Revit, I can select one of these. We'll just grab this as an example, and we can take hypermodeling to kind of a brand new level. Because those plans are not created to PDF, when we go to the personal document format, we're losing all of that data from Revit that is already in there. So Revizto keeps the integrity of that data, and we can see that we are combining the existing conditions with the point cloud, as well as the model and the plan that came in as well. So now that we've maybe identified a problem area, we can come in here and we can drop a stamp. And again, I think we created a CDX stamp here as well, but I'll come in and find our Construction Progress Coalition bucket, and here's our common data exchange, and I'll just drop that stamp in here. And bringing it full circle, we have the ability then to send that to Procore, thus allowing us to identify that specific issue with the real world coordinates in the field. Another cool thing about this, and one thing we added up, and folks will probably ask, how does this data, work in the field if we're utilizing tablets? And we've worked really, really hard to keep the integrity of the data, but still make it very manageable and very usable. We found OBJs to be the lightest way to be able to identify visually those issues within the field. However, if you're using point clouds as well, we are able to run this on the tablets. So if you'll notice in the latest version of Revizto, we have this visual effect button. And from here, we can kind of select the optimal size of this point cloud. So you'll see as I reduce the quality of the points, that size is going to be more efficient for tablets. And then to Nathan's point about the dashboard aspect. So we'll actually just jump back to that other project real quick and show, well, I guess we could use this one. So we'll come into Issue Tracker. We set filters here, and I'm just going to select our dashboard. And the cool thing about this dashboard is we're capturing these, real conditions within, and actually, you know what, I'm going to go back to, even though that we captured this data in the field, we don't have a very robust dashboard in that example. So I'm going to show you our demo project, which has thousands of issues, and going to have a more robust dashboard in this example. So we'll come in here, and we actually have a webinar test we've already set up. And I believe we actually created, here's our CPC one. So we can see a breakdown of those specific issues. So we can see actually 6 of those issues, and I think 3 of them we created on this webinar from Dan McKinnon, had that Construction Progress Coalition stamp. We had 1 to Armin, 1 to Greg, and 1 to David Ray. So obviously that data is being pulled in real time based off of the metadata coming from that project. So there's no more, putting together manual graphs and charts that are going to be out of date as soon as somebody identifies a new problem within the field.
Yeah, I mean, what a great example of changing how we baseline productivity, performance, and all these measurements. That these dashboards give us a ton of information, but do we even know what we want to measure? I think that's half the battle, right?
Absolutely.
Back up here. So yes, and so much of this too has to do with timing, as all these different examples of really using more or less from a user standpoint, the same workflow in Revizto, but can apply in all these different areas. And, so much of this discussion that we're having, outside of just a technology perspective is that, that whole conversation of what should be happening, in the common data environment at the end of the job, if you're not having that conversation, up at that owner's expectation at the very beginning and providing those costs and everything up front, we're really never going to get what we expect if we're expecting it at the very end of the job. So I think that's a big part of this too, is empowering folks with, where do we need to have these discussions in order to get high quality data and have that efficiency of streamlining from application to application. But yeah, so as we kind of summarize and get into any Q&A, I think there's really three components when it comes to really how to build your own strategy in the digital age, and where CDX comes into this is that, first and foremost, regardless of which stakeholder you are, of owner, designer, builder, operator, what is your technology stack? Are you a Procore as your what we'd call a system of record, and or you may be a Newforma, or you may be other products that are out there, but what is that common data environment? I think is something that we don't necessarily haven't addressed, and a lot of them don't have one yet. So the second one is about the exchange themselves, and do we understand from one player to the other what data needs to exchange, and can we actually articulate that? Because a lot of times we say we want it to connect, but we don't really tell them exactly what should or should not connect. So that's a big kind of step two. And then the last one, again, going back to the owners and owning that idea of a common data environment, because I think we all want the common data environment, but we can only have it when it's driven by the owner. So how do we convince the owner that it's in their best interest to do that? We've talked for days at conferences and held at the moon trying to figure it out, but I think it's, again, about selling the value to them. Of that as-built example is a great example, or just other reasons why we should start to move towards more of a common data environment platform. And obviously they should be in the cloud, and I see a ton of reasons why Revizto would make a great common data environment for a project. So with that, anything you want to add, Mark, on that?
No, I think you nailed it, Nathan.
So and then the last thing I will plug. So we, it was great to collaborate with. Actually, met Mark for the first time last year at the AEC Next event. So we will be back there again, May 22nd, 23rd, 2019. If you are interested in getting involved in some of these initiatives, where we have just kicked off an RFI initiative, I'm going to be looking at focusing on quality, safety, productivity, all these different metrics, and going to the project level through these CDX initiatives to solve these problems and tell that story in these types of reports. So if you want to get involved, head to constructionprogress.org/membership to learn more about that stuff, and hope to see you guys in Anaheim in May.
Yeah, good point, Nathan. And anybody that's joined the AEC Next, and last year's AEC Next and SPAR combined, and saw the crazy guy running up and down the aisles with a microphone, drawing attention to himself, that was Nathan Wood. And I think we had a number of great individuals over there from a variety of different spaces. I know we had McCarthy was over there. I think we had Rosadin, we had Bluebeam, we had some individuals from Procore, we had some individuals from Autodesk. So it was really cool to see a wide variety of different individuals from different backgrounds talking about these similar problems. And it's really kind of a collaborative environment. So we have a large group of people around a whiteboard, and we're talking about specific issues that maybe from different industries we may not recognize. However, somebody on the electrical side may. It's something that really kind of opens up the eyes, and we can address those shared pains. And it makes it a lot of fun to share, to say the least.
Yeah, it's cathartic, right?
Yeah. So guys, if you guys have any questions, it looks like we still got a large amount of people still sitting on the webinar right now. So if you guys got questions, feel free to shoot those in. Also, if you guys have any recommendations or thoughts on other webinars that we should do, or people you want to see us bring on from Revizto, whether it's specific partners of Revizto, or if it's other softwares you want us to integrate with, certainly let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback so we can make these webinars as productive as possible. But it looks like we only have a couple questions, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing based on the amount of people that were on here. But can you see the questions as well, Nathan?
Yeah. And the first one I think is a good discussion. I think it's kind of a comment / a question. I'll just read part of it here. Isn't trying to manage project data in formats also related to questioning the format of our deliverables rather than drawings? Why not use model database information? Why we produce Excel schedules or PDF drawings when we can use a much richer data format? And I think to your point there, I 100% agree. And I think this way of articulating that as a company, you should absolutely have a database driven, standards and rich format. And it's when you need to exchange that data with someone else, how much do you want to share with them? You probably don't want to, give them access to your entire database. You're going to need to share a flat file with them that might be a PDF or a CSV or something like that. But can that flat file be picked up from someone else and brought into their very sophisticated database and be machine readable and not have to manually re-enter that data from application to application? That's where I think, we've always gotten to this argument, especially with BIM folks, of it should all be in BIM, it should all be in one place. But the reality is that we're moving towards, and there's even a great BD&C article that just came out recently that, BIM has now officially moved outside of the center. Data is at the center, and the visualization of that data is just one spoke in that wheel. And the more we start to understand that and own our own database standards, the better off we'll be. It's the fact that we work on projects where some companies have sophisticated databases and some companies are still on Excel. And so we have to be able to cater to both. And that's why CPC and the CDX exists.
Yeah, well said, Nathan. So I think we had a couple other comments on there, but other than that, I think that's the only question. So I wanted to thank everybody for their time, and Nathan, really appreciate you jumping on here and telling us a little bit about your background and the problem that you guys are solving at the Construction Progress Coalition, and excited to kind of see how this year turns out and see the growth at CPC.
Yeah, and then again, right back at you. Thanks to Revizto for believing in what we're trying to do and being a supporter, being a member this year. So excited to solve these shared pains together this year.